December 6, 2024. And everyone who's here today or watching online anywhere in the world, if you had been here 20 years ago, when the concept of Mubadala was a dream in some eyes, extremely ambitious program, as I sat there that day and listened to what you wanted to achieve, in many ways it was aspirational. But today, 20 years later, you've achieved more than even your plan back then. And I think for those that are with us here in Abu Dhabi today, or those that are watching us anywhere in the world, the idea of what you can achieve under the leadership of the country and the sophistication today of the financial markets in the UAE, the sky is the limit. And one of the reasons we started this program many years ago was to make sure you could see with your own eyes the enormous potential to form new businesses, to grow businesses, to attract the best and brightest in the world to come here. Let's go back to that meeting we had 20 years ago and think about what your goals were, what you've achieved, as we think about where Mubadala is going to go next and where the country is going to go next.
Well, first, good afternoon. Hi, Mike.
Khaldoon, it's always great to see you, whatever country we're in. It's a pleasure. One of these days, I know many of you are asking, we're going to have the best of Khaldoon. We're going to put it on. It'll be a 6-part miniseries. We're going to talk to Netflix and see his wisdom over the years.
Well, I've been lucky and privileged to have known you for 20 years. And I think your guidance, your mentorship over these 20 years has been very special to me, Mike. I really appreciate that, genuinely, from the bottom of my heart. More importantly, we've had 20 years. I'm looking forward to the next 30 years with Mike.
I'm signing up.
My mission, to be clear, my mission is to make sure Mike continues to sprint the way he's sprinting for the next 30 years, at least. Because I need you. We all need you.
Thank you.
Okay. So, 20 years ago, I mean, this was feels like yesterday. In life, you have to have ambition, you have to have aspiration, you have to have, raise the bar on where you want to go. And when we met together back then, I think this was the beginning of our journey in Mubadala, the very early days. We're going back here to 2004. 2004, Mubadala had just been created. We were an institution with really, at that point, maybe $50 million of paid-up capital, assets under $200 million, and really in one space, which was energy. And the aspiration was to build a world-class investment institution that is diversified, that adds value to its shareholder, in this case, as a sovereign fund, the government, that would create and bring multiple sectors that didn't exist in the UAE, create them in an economically sustainable way, while creating value to the country, creating jobs, the right quality of jobs, diversifying the economy, and then growing our investment base globally in a new way. Abu Dhabi, as you know, has multiple sovereign funds. We needed to create a new sovereign fund with its own distinct proposition. What was that proposition? 20 years ago, we weren't clear. We had ambitions, we had aspirations. 20 years later, I think we're pretty clear in terms of where we are today, and more importantly, where we're going. But it's been an incredible journey. Today, we're $330 billion of assets under management. As you can see, it's been quite a remarkable growth story. When you look at us as a sovereign fund and you compare us to our peers in Asia, from Singapore to China to Hong Kong, Malaysia, Indonesia, to our peers in North America in terms of pension funds, to Europe, Norway, and others. I think Mubadala today has a reputation and credibility and a track record now, a 20-year track record that is quite distinct.
I think it isn't just Mubadala itself, Khaldoon. It's what has been created. You know, as individuals all over the world look where they're going to headquarter their company, where they're going to live. So the other night I was visiting with a number of CEOs who moved here and were based here, but they traveled the world so significantly that they couldn't meet the requirement, tax requirement of being here 180 days. And so you didn't have to wait for a protest or issue. You immediately moved to 90 days. So if you're here 90 days. And so adapting to the change in the world. And I remember it was 2006 when I came here and cut that ribbon at the Imperial College Diabetes Center. And so as you think about the world, the most modern diabetes center in the world, a combination of capital from Mubadala, but bringing in one of the 20 leading bioscience universities in the world, Imperial College, who has had numerous Nobel Prize winners to partner with you. And then a few years later, a much larger investment in the Cleveland Clinic, one of the leading healthcare providers in the world, putting up the capital, changing. And one of the things I remember when I was here, people were wondering, if you bring a leading medical institution, can you recruit the best doctors, researchers here for these enormous platforms that are being created? And I remember, I think there was 5 or 10 applications for every opening. So the idea, if you build it under the right leadership, they will come. As you look back at the various investments you've made, as we think, and you and I have discussed over the years, the number one asset of a country is its human and social capital. Why would a person want to move to another country, build their activities there? The U.S. has been a major beneficiary in that 50% of every scientist and software engineer in Silicon Valley has not been born in Silicon Valley. 50 of the 100 largest companies in the United States, the CEO was not born in the United States. And so what I see as so unusual is the assimilation of individuals from all over the world, so many different countries here. What is that culture that's allowed you to attract and bring many of the best and brightest and build some of the great companies of the future?
So when you look at the UAE, you have to go back since 1971. 1971, of course, was the formation of the country. We have a federal system, 7 emirates, 7 states, formed in 1971. We had a visionary leader, always these stories, wherever you are, Singapore, etc. You have to have leadership. You have to have a vision. And the UAE had that in Sheikh Zayed. He formed the federation, he established the country, and I would say the first chapter of this story was this 1971 until 2000, where the foundation of the country, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of both human and physical, the build-out of everything. If you have pictures of the UAE in the 1960s and 50s, and you compare them to what you see today in Abu Dhabi and Dubai and Sharjah and Ajman, wherever you go, it's been quite a remarkable journey of development. And then you see the people. You see the people that were here, our grandfathers and grandmothers and fathers and mothers, these generations, how we've also evolved in this journey. What Sheikh Zayed did was build the foundation. The foundation based on human, the people, education, healthcare, infrastructure, and a clear vision and strategy to build a nation that had natural resources, but he had the instinct that these natural resources cannot be the dependent premise of how this country was going to grow for future generation. It needed to actually, you needed to use that wealth to diversify and give this country a long-term sustainable future. That was kind of his vision and the foundation of what he established. And he did that. That took the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, and then we had the next generation of leadership. His Highness Sheikh Khalifa, next president, the second president of the country, who continued on that vision and then took it to the next notch. From there on, we have Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, the current president. I mention our presidents because vision and leadership is critical. You ask me a question, what makes this country so unique? Well, we got a track record. When you look at business, you look at track record, you look at execution record, you look at performance, and you look at leadership. You mention that to me all the time. When you look at any place, look at the CEO, look at who's running that business, and look at their performance. That's what we have in the UAE. We have a 53-year record right now of leadership that has a clear vision, clear strategy, clear execution track record. And now what we have is this next, I would say, chapter. When I look at I mentioned the first chapter until the early 2000s, then there was the second chapter, 2000 to, let's say, 2020. And now we have this new chapter from 2020 onwards, which looks at really moving from a country that was trying to be competitive to a country that was competitive regionally, to a country now that is competitive globally, to now for the future, a country that can be competitive in every important matrix we care about, top 3. That's kind of the target. We want to be number 1, but obviously our target is to be top 3 in every one. And that's now, when I look at the next 20 years, that's where we're going. So how do we attract the type of talent you've just described? It's a talent that looks at fundamentals. Consistency, track record, ecosystem. Do we have an ecosystem in terms of a business-friendly environment, in terms of a lifestyle environment, in terms of good healthcare, good schooling, safe, secure, an economic environment that allows business to grow and prosper and to operate globally in a world where the world is going against globalization? Is this going to be a beacon for the opposite, where you can actually operate here, north, west, east, south, in a jurisdiction that has the right legal framework that allows these businesses to prosper and grow, and allow these folks to come in and operate and grow in the most conducive way? That is, I think, where we're going, while we are betting, maybe betting is not the right word, while we are anchoring on what we think is going to be the future right now when it comes to the future of this world, the sectors that are going to be growing and prospering: AI, technology, financial services, life sciences, healthcare. These are the sectors that we're going to be zooming in on, and we are zooming in on, and making sure we have the right framework in place to allow our companies and our businesses to grow and scale up, but allow also the world to come in and grow and scale up here.
So we often talk about how are you measuring something, and Khaldoon talks about data, performance. And many people are very focused on the UAE today and the size of your sovereign funds, your investment funds, among the largest in the world, and a few $1 trillion here to invest. My suggestion to all of you, that's the wrong way to look at the UAE. Because just like a company, the major asset is not on the balance sheet. And so the movement of human capital, as we talk about balance of payments or movement of money or trade, the number one movement in the world in value is the movement of people from one place in the world to another. In the United States, we estimate you're looking at between 1,500 and 2,000 trillion in human and social capital, not on the balance sheet. And the creation of new industries and businesses was possible because of that. And so what's occurred here in this last 20 to 30 years is the movement into the UAE of some of the people's most talented innovated because of the responses and the ability you provide, from that standpoint. Now, I don't think many people in the audience know what is the leading country in the world that the most millionaires move to. For decades, it was the United States. What country could that be today, Khaldoon?
Well, that's a good question, Mike. In 2023 and 2024, when you look at the movement of high net worth individuals in terms of new jurisdictions around the world, the UAE came in first in these last 2 years. As important as being first, which is great, you look at who was number 2 and who was number 3. Number 2 was the United States, and number 3 was Singapore. And the UAE was as much as the number 2 and number 3 combined. So what does that tell you? It tells you something's working here. When high net worth individuals choose the UAE as a destination point, there is things that are working to all the points I said earlier that make it attractive. So it's not just about, obviously this is an important data point, but another data point, we're in the, and I mentioned that earlier, AI. What countries, what's the ranking of countries' embracement of AI? The UAE comes in the top 5. Now, that surprises many people. We're not the United States, we're not China, we're not creators of that technology. Yet for the UAE to pop up here in 2024 and to be on that top 5 list tells you, again, there was a clear direction and view that this is going to be a space that we as a country are going to anchor on. And accordingly, we started as a nation preparing ourselves to be enabled, to be AI enabled. I think the UAE will continue to be at the forefront of AI enablement, investment in that space, development of the necessary technology and infrastructure necessary for the enablement of AI. There's no question in my mind where AI is going now. How and when and what, that we can debate it, but there's no question of the impact and influence AI is going to have on the world. And we in the UAE have decided we're going to be on the frontier, hopefully, in that space.
So I see it a little differently, and then fielding the calls from Microsoft, Google, Amazon, wanting to be here, wanted to know who they can meet so they can invest billions of dollars. And so when you invest in a country, if you're going to build data centers for billions of dollars, after you've built them, you can't move them. So therefore, you need continuity of leadership and policy. So when I look back at the building of Singapore, and many of you over the years, we showed you that when Singapore and Jamaica separated from the UK about the same time in the 60s, at that point in time, per capita income in Singapore and Jamaica was the exact same. Jamaica followed a tourism, natural resource strategy. Singapore followed the education human capital to recruit. But what they did differently is they educated their own citizens to the level of the expats during that period of time. And today, the per capita income of Singapore is more than 20 times Jamaica. And when I look back at one time, I don't remember how many years ago, I believe Libya had higher per capita income than UAE.
Yes.
At one point in time.
If you look back, if you have a starting point of 1970, and we kind of imagine a race between two countries, Libya and then the UAE, obviously pre-establishment, and you look at a 54-year race, you probably would have bet on Libya back then. Same natural resources, give or take, size, maybe same size of population, access to the Mediterranean, access to the big market in terms of Europe, huge tourism potential in terms of, I think they have almost as much Roman antiquities than Italy. So incredible potential, but it boils down to where we started, management, leadership, execution. But going back, maybe if I can touch on the analogy between the journey that I described for the UAE and how we in Mubadala tried over the last 20 years of our existence to follow that journey, to build an institution that is able to run as fast and to drive the sort of economic outputs that the country was trying to achieve, that our shareholder was trying to achieve, and doing so, again, by trying to be, not plain vanilla. When you look at sovereign funds around the world, most sovereign funds operate in a pretty, I would call it plain vanilla way. Safe, conservative, targeting a return of 5 to 8%, 70-30 mix, public markets, bonds. That's kind of the general, I would say, model of most sovereign funds. And that ultimately spits out a return depending on where you are and depending on your size and depending on how well you manage these funds, between 5 to 8%. We've always tried to do better than that. And to do better than that, we can't do this model. We had to evolve into a different model. And the different model meant we had to go direct. Most sovereign funds shy away from going into private equity, shy away from going in direct, and stay very much dependent on their fund managers and the funds. By the way, good. We do that too. But what we've done is we said, okay, we're going to focus on what has now developed into 4 or 5 areas. Becoming good in how we deploy capital directly as private equity investors, building the right partnerships within that space in which we can get the right deal flow and invest well and evolve over time where we can be competitive with the best of them and go from good to great. And I think we're doing that. Build, and what we have today, a significant endowment fund, ADIC, that is able to have great relationships with these fund managers and give us a very good, sustainable, consistent return in a very well-managed way that tries to outperform the best endowments from Harvard to Yale to Princeton, etc. And I think we've done that too. Then create something new, which is sovereign funds don't typically do that. Evolve our capability to manage third-party capital. Establish our own GP in Mubadala Capital. Start to attract world-class third-party capital. In 10 years, we've gone from seeding Mubadala Capital with $2 billion to today, assets under management over $27 billion, of which $18 billion is coming from the best investors around the world, from the Ardians of the world to the BlackRocks to the Goldman Sachs, etc., that are all invested in our funds and follow us. But also, we're not there to just compete with them. We're there to go where we can have an edge, which is go in the right geographies, where we can actually build the right teams, find the right transaction and deal flow, and invest in a above market return target.
I noticed, Khaldoon, you didn't mention me as one of the LPs.
I'm coming to that. I'm coming to that, Malcolm. You see, you interrupted, Mike. I was building it up. I'll come.
So I concluded that,
I can't beat it.
gosh, I've invested in a number of countries over the years, but I'd be better off when I saw your operation in Brazil, that if I'm going to invest in Brazil now, 100% of the money I've invested in Brazil has gone through Mubadala Capital. And I don't think people fully realize the talent that you've been. So over this period of time, there's more than 70 firms, major firms in the world today, in money management, where their founder, their CEO work for me. And their turnover of personnel, etc., they would aspire to achieve what you've done and this enormous growth from this standpoint. So yes, 25 or so years ago when I first came, or 22 years ago when you were starting, people were young, they were learning, they got experience. Talk to us a little bit about how you've been able to retain and attract human capital.
I will do that, but I want to finish on that, if you allow me, on the previous point. So Mike took a bet on us there. I think maybe not enough of a bet, but I think he's done very well, and I think he's continuing to bet on us, and we're happy with that and delighted with that. And I think that there's two more spaces now that we are focusing on, which I think will be interesting to Mike and maybe interesting to this crowd, because that's, moving from private equity to the endowment model and fund management to the GP model in terms of Mubadala capital and managing third-party capital, to then going into the credit business, where we were, if you asked me in 2016 what would have been our credit exposure, it would have been zero. Today we have almost $20 billion of exposure in credit, and we've done that in a very thoughtful and direct way over these last 6-7 years with the right partners. Everything we do in Mubadala, we do it with the right partners. And in credit, we've been lucky to have partners like Apollo, like Fortress, like Ares, so many great partners that we've built platforms with in the United States, in Europe, in Asia Pacific, and that's another, what I would say, very clear growth area that we're going to continue to invest in, and it's done very well for us. And then finally, the latest thing that we're doing is, as a GP and investor, the creation of MGX, which is our AI and technology investment platform. We recognize this is a space that we have to be very zoomed in on. So everything we do, when we do that, we create the team, and then we just focus, we allocate the capital, and we run. MGX is now, we've just created it this year. It's a partnership between Mubadala and G42, and this is going to be a vehicle that is also not just going to invest our capital, but also bring in third-party capital, and already through partnering with, as always, great institutions like Microsoft, like BlackRock, and others, we are bringing in our partners with us in this journey as we invest in that space. Today, we are acting for ourselves, we are acting with our partners, we're generating new relationships, and that makes Mubadala ultimately, with all of that, different than most sovereign wealth funds, and then ultimately, what I hope, continues to be a performance record that outperforms our peers, and that is our commitment to ourselves and to our shareholder, which kind of ends me now with the question you said, which is how do we do that? We do that with people. The best thing for me is I have an incredible team in Mubadala, genuinely. And this is not me being arrogant or trying to sell a team. I think many of you around the room have dealt with many of our of Mubadala executives. We have a very strong team, and a team that's been also echoing that same story about the UAE, that's been consistent, that's been performing consistently, that's been retained. The retention side of talent is as difficult as anything, and Mike, you know that better than me. It's about finding the talent, building and developing that talent, retaining the talent, incentivizing them in the right way. And it's not just about the financial incentive, it's actually about the life, that commitment to this institution, to themselves within this institution. I think we have that. And that is, I think, what allows us to be different. And my commitment to these people is keep supporting them and keep building and making sure we continue to grow and outperform, and we get Mike to invest more with us.
So let me touch on another issue, I think, in closing here. For the last 20 years, I've been trying to put forth the idea that a great deal of the future of the UAE lies in South Asia and Africa. And so last year, there were almost 65 million children born in sub-Saharan Africa and just India. More than half of all the children in the world that were born. You're kind of sitting at the crossroads of where the largest population movement is. Africa and South Asia. And we have spent decades talking about the potential of the UAE in medical tourism, a leader in medical, a leader in managing money for this part of the world. The changes here and the shifts in world affairs, etc. Obviously, you have a front row seat to what's going on today. How do these economic realignments, trade, international business, how do you see them affecting both Mubadala and the UAE?
Well, we see them as opportunity, always. We see that as in a world that is, for lack of other word, decoupling in many ways. We're not. We're just simply not. We're not going to decouple. We're actually going to stay true to what we are and to our values. And we're going to keep those doors open. Southeast Asia, Asia in general, we're undervested in that. We need to, because that's where growth is. You mentioned India, 1.4 billion people, the largest population on earth, larger than China right now. India today, you mentioned that data point for me last night, which is stuck. They have more under 15, a population of under 15 that is larger than the population of the United States. So when you are an investment company like ourselves, when you are a country that looks not 4 years or 8 years, that looks 30 years, 40 years, 50 years, you have to take a very strong view on India. You have to take a strong view on Southeast Asia, because that is where growth is. That's where the populations are growing. Now, we don't have the size, but we have the ability to scale and open up markets, keep ourselves a very clear and open flow of capital and people in a proper way. And we have the willingness to embrace, because I go back, AI, because technology is going to be a massive factor of what's going to happen in the next 5, 10 years. Today, one promise I'm going to make to you today, we in Mubadala are going to be on the frontier side of AI enablement in our way of doing business next year, 2025. By the end of next year, 2025, in everything we do, in the way we operate, AI is going to be fully ingrained. Starting in 4 weeks, January 1st, I've given that deadline. Our first investment committee in the new year will have an AI member with us as part of our investment committee. Not a decision-making for the time being, a consultative co-pilot that has the Mubadala DNA that we've been developing over the last year, that is able to support our decision-making in terms of due diligence, in terms of analysis and assessment, and then a perspective on every decision we're going to make. That is also going to be everywhere in Mubadala, on the corporate side, on the administrative side, on the accounting side, on the investment side. We are going to be frontier on this. And by the end of 25, and by the time we're going to have our next session next year, I'm going to report back to you. But I am telling you, this is what we're going to do in terms of investment, in terms of operational model. We're going to be in a different place, and we're willing to take a bit of risk for lack of other word, in terms of how we're going to play with this to get ourselves smarter and smarter in that space. So Asia is going to be a focus area for sure for us, given the growth trajectories and demographics, technology enablement within the way we run and operate. And in Africa, we have to figure out how we are going to invest in Africa and how we are going to create value in a way that matches our risk profile. That is a nut that we haven't yet cracked, I will tell you, but we're going to have to figure it out.
So I was excited last night when your children had visited Ghana on a school trip and done work, and visited Kenya on a school trip to see the world. And I remember it was a few months ago when your president visited D.C., we were sitting there, and up you're pulling on your data how many people in hospitals are in the UAE, how many people in hospital beds, what are their diseases, sitting there as we were in the D.C. area, looking at that data. We only wish we had that access in the United States. So the next 20 years is going to be exciting, and I think the world will benefit in many ways for you being the center of it. Thank you, Khaldoon. Always good to see you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending the 6th Annual Milken Institute Middle East and Africa Summit. We hope you enjoyed your participation and created meaningful connections. Please join us for a closing reception right outside the ballroom. Thank you.